Okay, it looks like it's 1 o'clock. Time to get this show on the road. I'm Steve Mulberry with GISinc, and today I want to talk to you about some technology that you may or may not be familiar with, or if you are, maybe you're not sure quite how to leverage this or use this technology to innovate inside of the ArcGIS system, and that's webhooks, application links, and EURLs. And so we're going to kind of look at each one of these independently, but they all sort of support the same process or the same outcome. So let's get started. So let's start off by looking at each one of these and what does it mean to implement these in their different contexts there. So the first one we'll look at is webhooks. So webhooks gives us the ability to either augment or alter the behavior between web pages or web pages and applications, or applications and applications. It's sort of a high-level way of allowing two applications talk to each other or pass information back and forth to each other. And webhooks is unique in that when you create a webhook, it's actually just sitting there listening, waiting for information instead of having to go out and reach out and pull the calling application every few seconds or things like that, which is different from writing a script or something that's constantly going out and trying to find that information. And this is all in the context. So as we talk about these technologies in the context of within the ArcGIS system. So whether I need to communicate back and forth between different products or software within the ArcGIS system or other third-party providers out there. So think of this as maybe taking Survey 123 and creating a webhook into, say, Outlook Calendar, so that when someone fills out the survey, then that event gets created for me automatically inside Calendar. Webhooks allows me to do these kinds of behavior alterations or augmenting information back and forth. Application links takes us a little step further. It's an open standard for working within native applications running on your smartphone devices, and it allows us to communicate from one application to another application, again, within inside of the ArcGIS system or the ecosystem of products or other third-party applications. And it does this by extending the metadata context within the URL stream. So think of things that maybe you've used, say, Collector or Explorer or one of those mobile applications that I'm in one, say, Collector, and I want to be able to navigate from where I'm at here to that thing that I'm looking at in Collector. I can trigger that in Navigator and automatically give me that route. And it does that seamlessly, so you don't really know what's going on behind the scenes. And then EURL. EURL stands for an enterprise URL, and it's really a CityWorks branded use of technology, but the underlying actual technology is open source, so anybody can actually do what CityWorks is doing, but they've embedded this process inside of their solution. If you're not familiar with CityWorks, it's an asset management permitting system where you can save your searches and then give those searches a REST-based JSON URL that can be used inside of the ArcGIS platform. So maybe I'm in ArcGIS Online and I want to have a feature service representation of all the information coming from CityWorks. I can do that through this EURL technology. Now, you may have heard a term called deep linking. So that's the sort of the umbrella term for everything we're talking about here, whether it's webhooks, application links, or EURL, or these kinds of communications between software applications, mobile applications, web pages, and things like that. So let's go a little bit deeper in here. Let's look at Survey 123 first. So here we're going to use Survey 123 to help trigger automation through a webhook. And this is done by an HTTPS post. And I can do things like trigger an email or a text message or update a social media site or maybe take the information that's being collected and update a data repository someplace else other than inside of what the survey does. And this is accomplished through creating webhooks in one of these providers. There's several connector providers out there. You'll see the list here. I'm going to focus on Microsoft's Power Automate. This is that concept where I take Survey 123 and inside Power Automate, I create this webhook that allows Outlook to listen for information and then react on that based on what the information is being passed over. And you can see from this list, it's just a quick list, but there's hundreds, literally hundreds of activities or steps or webhook providers that give you access to different technologies. Office 360 has a whole suite of them. You can see a list of them here. Literally, there's hundreds of them. And the other connector providers out there have their own series of actions and connectors that you can take advantage of. So let's take a look here. I want to show you a demo. On the left side, this is a recording. This is a demo that I did. On the left side here, I've got my survey 123 that I'm building out here called sample webhooks. And I've got 3 elements. One's a location, right? Pick a location. One's a drop-down box that allows me to pick up or select a pickup type. So here I'm simulating a trash pickup. So I got can, container, bulk items. And then I got a scheduled time. When am I going to want to schedule that pickup? Here I've hard-coded some numbers in there for the demo. But basically, you build this survey out, save it, publish it out, and this is what something would look like. 3 simple elements there. Okay, and I'm going to define my location, select a pickup, and then schedule that time. And I'm going to create this webhook inside of Power Automate. Now, there's several ways you can start this process of creating this flow. You can see here a few of those options here. I'm just going to start the basic flow here, give it a name. And what's interesting is I start to type in that trigger. When I start to type in survey 123, it's going to list out for me all that is available to me. So let's see, it's already built in. Survey 123 is already built into Microsoft Power Automate. I can grab that trigger, and all I really need is that unique ID of that survey. Once I create and save that survey out, you get a unique ID. I go to that URL, I can grab that unique ID from the URL, and I can cut and paste that inside of this process, and then just start adding new steps. Whether it's doing an email or an Outlook or whatever, you can see there's literally hundreds of different action items and triggers that you can use inside this process. Now, I've already created one, so I'm going to go back to my webhooks. Here's, I got one survey to Outlook. I'm going to open that up for you so you can kind of see this end result. So here's that first connection to that survey. I've cut and pasted that unique ID in there, and I've added 3 steps. One, to calculate my time zone to make sure I'm in the right time zone. Then send an email notification and create an event in Outlook. So over here on the right side of the screen is my Outlook, open up to that date when I created this demo here. And I'm going to execute this process and see if this webhook can do what it really is supposed to do. So here I'm inside my survey. I begin the process. I'm going to establish a location. In this case, I'm going to pick a type. I'm going to do a bulk item pickup. I'm going to leave the default values in there, and I'm going to hit submit. So Outlook, through that webhook, is sitting there listening for information. Once it gets that information, then it's going to do 2 things. It's going to create a new event inside of my calendar. There's the bulk item pickup. And it's also going to send me an email notification. So maybe you're in the dispatch center and you're coordinating this activity, type of activity. You can get a notification, plus you can get a calendar invite. So you can kind of see where you can take this kind of technology, where you can use things like Survey 123 to automate or alter behavior in other applications, like you saw here via Outlook, calendar, and email notifications. Let's look at another example here. Webhooks plays a vital role in administering ArcGIS Enterprise. This gives me the ability to monitor activity and trigger events, or automate activity, or automate the processing of information based on activity that's happening inside of ArcGIS Enterprise. It does this the same way through an HTTPS request, but it allows me to monitor things that are happening against my items or my groups or my users or my roles. So things that when items are added or users are added or permissions change or things are deleted or someone gets shared information, all that stuff is being monitored. Well, I can actually grab that data through a webhook and then do things with it. Now, when you configure Enterprise to a webhook, Enterprise creates this payload, and this payload has several pieces of information attached to it. And ArcGIS Enterprise and Esri has given you some ways of working with that payload. If you're familiar with the Java servlet development environment, you can use SDK for that. Again, use one of those third-party connector providers. I'm going to focus again on Power Automate, but it also comes with a Node.js web service. So if you're into kind of creating and using Node.js, there's some good examples there. But I'm going to do the same kind of concept. I'm going to use Power Automate to listen to activity inside of ArcGIS Enterprise and then email me, the administrator, of when things happen. So let's take a look at that. And before I do that, I want to point out something. In order to get to the webhooks management screen, you have to change the URL. So there's not a button right off of the enterprise homepage to the portal to get you right to this. So you change it from the portal URL to portal/sharing/rest. So let's take a look at that. Here I'm in my demo portal environment. I'm going to change to sharing/rest. Then I'm just going to click on my organization ID when I get to this REST endpoint. So we'll see here, there's my organization ID. I click on that, and then scroll down to the very bottom. This is where you get the management items, and there's webhooks. So here's where I can create and manage all the webhooks inside of my environment. It's real simple. Hit create webhook, give it a name, assign that payload URL. We're going to talk about that here in a second. I can pass over any optional information. I can set up some configuration properties. I'm going to leave all that default. The key here is in this trigger box down here at the bottom. What do I want to listen for? So here I type in one of those activities, and here I'm going to listen for all things items. Something's added, deleted, or whatever. So now let's create that payload. Here I'm right back in Power Automate. I'm going to create a new flow, give it a name, and remember the communication is through HTTPS. So when I start this process, I'm going to grab that trigger. So I just type in HTTPS, find one of those triggers that I'm going to use, bring that in, and then HTTPS post requires a JSON body. So this payload comes in a JSON format. Well, Esri has already given us that. So if you go to the Create and Manage Webhooks documentation, scroll down about halfway through, you'll see this, this definition of what this payload description looks like. So I'm just going to copy that, bring that back over to my flow, and place that into the JSON payload. And that's all you have to do. So once I'm done here, I'll save this HTTP request. And the next thing I'm going to do is start adding the next step, just like I did before. So this next step, I want to email any activities happening with the items. So go out and find my email step. Again, since I'm in Office 360, I'll grab that action item. And since I'm on my domain, if I start typing in a name or a group or whatever, I'll get that list. Here, I'm just going to email myself that. Now watch what happens here. So in the subject line, I'm just going to put in some text here, but when I clicked on that, you notice off to the right, that payload gave me a list of all of the parameters associated in that payload. And here, I want to actually grab one of those items out of that payload, and I want to grab the operation. What's happening right now? Is something being added, deleted, changed, modified? What's going on? So here, I'll grab that operation, and that's really it. So I got two steps: the request, the action, and I save that. Now, when I save that, you'll notice here in the HTTP request, it creates this URL. That's the payload. That's what you need to copy and take back to your webhooks and paste that into the payload URL section. So name, the payload URL, any optional information, and then what triggers that I want to keep track of. Here, I'm just going to change it to JSON. I'm going to create that. And what I'm looking here is that up the top there, success equals true. That means it's created that. And here's all the parameters associated with it. But if I want to, I can go back a couple pages here, refresh my webhooks area, and you can see now I got that new webhook in there, and I can manage that, and I can create more. So I've gone through this process of creating this webhook to communicate to ArcGIS Enterprise. I've got ArcGIS Online ready to go here, and I've got over here my Outlook email. So back in ArcGIS Online, if I go to add a new item, I'm just going to go out and grab a spreadsheet from my data folder here. And I'm going to go through this process of starting this creating a new item. Okay, and so just because ArcGIS Enterprise recognized that an item is now starting to be created, I've already gotten an email alert. I don't even have to finish this process. I could finish the tags, do everything else here, but I don't have to because I've already gotten an alert saying someone's trying to add a new item to your ArcGIS Enterprise. And I can open that up, you can see there's that operation, add. Okay, and so just by virtue of executing that process, that's what happened. So if I go back to ArcGIS Online, and instead of finishing this, if I just go ahead and hit cancel right now, ArcGIS Enterprise recognized that somebody's trying to cancel an action or cancel an item. So it sent me on an alert saying, yes, that operation, someone just committed delete. So I could extend this, right? I could put more information in there. Who's doing this action? When are they doing it? You know, what are they trying to add? Is it a file database? Is it a spreadsheet? I can really get sophisticated on what I monitor and how I alert the administrators on that process. So a great tool for administrators to kind of manage and monitor what's going on within their environment.
Yep.
Okay, let's go over to application links here.
Steve, real quick before we move on, we have a couple questions on webhooks. Would you like to take now or at the end?
Sure, go right now. Yeah, what do you got?
Okay, so first question, how is the communication from the webhook to the application, i.e. Outlook, secured?
Secure. So it's through HTTPS, so that it has to be through HTTPS, so it's all going to be encrypted every time you send that information over. And within that webhook, you have to log into Power Automate per se and provide credentials to get in there to begin with. And then when you establish that connection, it's all through HTTPS, so secure socket layer.
Okay, and in this example of the webhook, is this an open service application or is it using some type of authentication?
So sort of the same question. So there is authentication going on behind the scenes to create that webhook, but because you're the administrator of that webhook, you're basically saying, I'm giving this webhook permissions to talk to this thing or this trigger or this step that I'm configuring in the process. Right, so the communication is secure, but you as an administrator are given permission to that webhook to talk to this one thing, to that one step. And you could have several steps in there that require different levels of security, but you as the creator of that webhook are controlling what information is going to what thing, so you can be sure that the communication is secure between those activities.
All right, awesome. Thank you, Steve.
All right, cool. All right, so let's go to app links or application links. And in here, we're basically passing over the state of one application to the state of another application, like Collector sending information over to Navigator to change the state between the two. And this is a common workflow that we all are very, very used to. So on our phones, we have a contacts application. We go into that contacts application, we find someone we want to call, and then we click on the phone button. It opens up the phone app, passing over to it information that then starts dialing that contact. That's exactly what's happening within this environment if we're going to talk to one mobile application to another mobile application, in this case, Explorer to a Navigator. Now, there's several schemas, URL schemas that you could take here. iOS has their own, Android, BlackBerry, Windows, but Esri has standardized on the iOS style URL. So it doesn't matter what platform you're developing on or want to communicate back on, it's always going to be the same, so you can rest assured that you don't have to worry about mixing the schemas there. So let's take a look at this. So here I've got an example of my phone. I'm looking at ArcGIS Explorer here. I got some items. These are basically work orders. If I click on one of these, you can see there's two items there. One's a reported leak, one's an assignment. If I look at the details of that reported leak, I can click on the directions. So from an Explorer, now you saw Navigator open up automatically, routing me to that location from my current point. So let's watch that again here. So we're inside Explorer. I've got some items here that I'm looking at. I click on one of those features. I see I got two features at that location. I'm going to go into the details of just the reported leak one. And now within here, as soon as I hit directions, it's calling Navigator, passing over the information I need to then route me to that location. And Esri has built in this application linking between all of its mobile applications, right? So from Explorer to Navigator, from Survey to Navigator, from Survey to Indoors, all back and forth here. Now, what's really neat about this is that Esri is evolving the way these mobile applications are being used. So you're probably familiar with the ArcGIS field maps. Esri has taken the capabilities within Collector, Explorer, and Tracker and have embedded them inside of ArcGIS field maps. So right now, you can just use one application for those three things. And this year, and through this year and next year, Navigator and Workforce are going to make its way into field maps. So at some point in time, all five of those applications are going to make its way into, or the capabilities are going to make its way into field maps. This is really nice because it gives us one application to work with. And a side note here is that as these capabilities from Collector and Explorer and Tracker and Navigator Workforce make their way into field maps, there's going to be a deprecation for that application. So right now, Collector, Explorer, and Tracker are going to be deprecated as of December of this year. So if you're using those applications, you should start finding a way to migrate and to use field maps. And it's really easy to do. It's in some cases, it's just a reopening field maps, repointing to the maps that you were using in those older applications, and it just works. If you need any help, please reach out to us and we can kind of walk you through that process. And keep in mind that Navigator and Workforce are going to make their way into the platform over this year and into next year. And what's really cool about this is that application links is still available. So as developers write other applications and other third-party things that run on your smartphone devices, field maps will be able to communicate with them the exact same way. So the application links doesn't go away. Okay, EURL, Enterprise URL. Again, this is that CityWorks sort of branded use of technology that's based off of saved searches inside of CityWorks. So inside CityWorks, I can manage all of my assets, my work orders, my service requests, those kinds of things, my permits. And these URLs are tied directly to the data records. So what happens is that when I create this EURL, I get this REST-based feature service. It's literally the exact same thing that ArcGIS Online, ArcGIS Enterprise uses as a hosted feature, right? It's the REST endpoint to a hosted feature service. And I can take that hosted feature service then and then plug that right into ArcGIS Online or ArcGIS Enterprise, because it follows that same standard. So let's go through that process. All right, so here I'm sitting inside my demo CityWorks dashboard, and I'm going to go through the process of creating this search and then using that search inside of ArcGIS Online. So the first step is to define what I'm interested in. And you can see there's quite a variety of ways I can define the search itself. So here I'm interested in all open work orders in the water group. So I'll pick water from my entity group there. I'll go down to my work orders section and I'll click on no. So it's not closed. I want to make sure everything is open. So we'll set those two parameters and then I'll run it just to make sure that it's giving me back information. So I'll hit the search button there. It'll come back, it should come back with about 110 records. So we can see that, yes, this search is working. These are all my open work orders right now inside the water department within this organization. So once I validate that, I save that. Now here, talking about security and making sure the information is secure going from one place to the next, this is where I can define what employees have access. If I'm going to share this with a domain, a group, or an individual user, this is where I can provide that first level of security. So as an administrator, I come in here, I define this search, I save it, I assign who has access to it, and then I can expose that to ArcGIS Online or ArcGIS Enterprise. So if I go back to my saved searches now, you should see at the very top one there's that open work orders search. If you go over to the right, you'll see that EURL is set to true. But if I click on the services link there, it's going to give me that endpoint and that feature service representation of all that data. And all I have to do now is grab that URL and take that to either online or enterprise. Okay, so here I've got ArcGIS Online open. I'm going to add that just like I would add any other layer from the web. I'll paste that endpoint URL in there, and you'll see automatically then I got dots on a map coming from CityWorks, which is really cool because now this is just a hosted, this is a feature service coming from CityWorks, which means when CityWorks updates that information, when someone goes in there and makes a new work order or closes a work order or does whatever, it's going to automatically show up here. And I can treat this just like any other feature layer. So I can change the pop-ups, the symbology, the table structure here. I can get this ready inside of my web map and then take that web map right into a dashboard. So here I can use that information, expose that information inside of a dashboard or a story map or experience builder or any other solutions out there that Esri provides for me to visualize and share this information. So let's kind of wrap this up and recap real quick. So we talked about webhooks as a way to augment or alter behavior between one application and another application. AppLink allows us to kind of change that state between one application and another application, like we saw in Collector and Navigator. And then finally, EURL gives us the ability to grab information out of the CityWorks environment and bring that into the ArcGIS systems, right? Whether it's online or enterprise as a feature service, then I can then use in web maps and dashboards and things like that. See these technologies only improving and getting more entrenched and integrated into the whole ArcGIS system of products and solutions, whether it's online, in enterprise, within the development world, right? These things are going to be more prevalent because it's a really nice way to push information or share information back and forth between different applications. So with that, I'm going to close up, and I thank you so much for joining this session. If there's, Wendy, if there's any more questions, we can handle those now, but if not, hit us at gisinc.com or email Wendy and myself, and we'd be glad to help talk you through them.
So Steve, can the webhooks be automated to reflect a future date? For example, in Survey 123, if an annual inspection is completed, can webhooks automatically set a reminder for the next year's inspection?
Interesting concept. So can webhooks automatically? So typically that's not how webhooks are used to do things in the future, because they're sitting there listening for information coming from a calling application. So what could happen is that when that first thing happens over to the webhook could do two things: log it now and then also log it a year from now. So that's one way to kind of overcome that.
Okay, and let me just check in the chat and see if there's any additional questions. Does not look like there are.
Great. All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining. And again, reach out if you have any questions. Awesome technology. We'd love to talk to you about it.
Oh, wait, Steve, one more just came in.
Oh, great.
Can webhooks hook into the Google Suite?
Yes. So think of webhooks as an open standard out there between all platforms. I don't care if you're Google or Microsoft or Esri or whatever. Webhooks has a wide open. I could talk to Google Docs. I could talk to just about anything out there. And you'll notice as you start searching for connector providers and actions and triggers within those providers, there's literally a list of hundreds of things you can do throughout the industry. Anything else, Wendy?
Let's see. I think we have a few seconds lag behind.
Yep. Yep. And we got a few seconds here left.
And there was a question about if the presentation will be available after. Yes, they will be available for replay, or you can email either one of us and we can send you a PDF copy as well.
Yes, definitely.
All right, well, I think that is it in the chat. Thank you so much, everybody.